Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today we are predicting the Stanley Cup final between the Edmonton Oilers or the Florida Panthers. Who's going to win? Find out more in a bit. Thank you for joining us here at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports. If it's your first time joining us here, which it very well could be, make sure that you subscribe down below, youtube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports. It's our new NHL channel. We have split off from the original I-80 Sports, which is now the designated pundits. So our old content is there if you want to go find it there, but check out our new content here, as well as the content that we're going to be bringing you over the summer between free agency reactions, trade reactions, and just overall getting ready for the 2024 and 2025 NHL season. That still feels weird to say, but we got a little ways to go until we get there. But subscribe down below, drop a comment, let us know what you think about this upcoming Stanley Cup matchup. We're excited. I know you guys are excited too. Let us know down below what you guys think. If you're still on Twitter, make sure you follow us down below at I80_Sports NHL. And if you follow us already, thank you all so much because we greatly value all of your support. I'm Brian. Directions, he's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well, I guess as well as I can be. For the second time in 3 years, it's unfortunate that my team went out in the Eastern Conference Finals. What can you do against a team that I particularly don't like this time? Whereas 2 years ago, I was upset to lose to them, but I didn't have a hatred towards Tampa, or rather a dislike towards Tampa as the dislike I have towards Florida. Point being is this, Stanley Cup Finals. It's better than last year's, and it should be pretty good. It's a good matchup with some good players, some good storylines, and, we'll review what happened, and we'll just get right into what we think might happen.
Yeah, there's a lot to dissect with this upcoming Stanley Cup matchup. But before we dissect that, we've got to review a little bit of the conference finals and talk about what happened in the Eastern and Western Conference Finals first. So on the Eastern side of things, we saw the Florida Panthers play the New York Rangers in a 7-game series, which, unfortunate for Tom, Rangers come up short in 6 games. So Florida Panthers went 6 games with the New York Rangers. As we predicted, we knew it was going to be a long series, but it was Florida coming out on top and going to the Stanley Cup final. On the Western Conference side of things, we saw the Dallas Stars face off against the Edmonton Oilers, and the Dallas Stars ran out of gas right at the finish line. Dallas was eliminated in 6 games by the Edmonton Oilers. Lots to kind of bring up here, but Tom, just overall thoughts from both series. Do you feel like the Rangers were just banged up and that's why they didn't get over the finish line? And do you feel the same for Dallas?
Well, in terms of banged up, it's a 2-part question, really. Now that we know what we know that 3 of their defensemen were hurt. Adam Fox is playing on one knee, basically. He re-injured his knee in Game 4 against Washington. Jacob Trouba was playing with a part of his ankle basically chipped off, whereas walking around and doing daily activities is fine, but it hindered his skating. And Ryan Lindgren, the warrior that he is, was playing with a broken rib. Now, you could say, oh, well, that's 3 defensemen. That's not the team. Well, Florida's style of play, system of play, is conducive to a hard forecheck, getting the puck in the zone and not letting it get out. The Rangers generally do have some mobile defensemen, Adam Fox being one of them, Jacob Trouba being another one, able to force plays back up the boards, able to force things on the fast transition. And I had said it before, and I'll say it again. Florida likes to hold the puck down deep. What the Rangers needed to do was to try to force the puck up to where these defensemen are pinching and get a rush and go back down the other way. It worked out sometimes, other times it didn't. But when you're basically having your top 2 defensemen in Fox and Trouba hurt, You can't beat that style of play. That was number one. Number two,
to add on to your point, though, real quick,
just to add on the top players not showing up.
Yeah, can I add on to your point real quick? It kind of leaves me to think it. Yeah. Sorry about that. It kind of leads me to think, would the Rangers have been better off with Zach Jones in this series on the left-hand side if Ryan Lindgren was playing hurt, just to have a player that plays more north-south hockey with a 200-foot game? Because Zach Jones is known for his speed. He's known for his offensive prowess at the defensive position. There are some question marks in his defensive game, which is why he hasn't seen the ice as consistently this season for the New York Rangers. But if you ask any New York Rangers fan recently, it leaves kind of the question of, like, if you knew you needed to adapt against the Florida Panthers and how fast their lineup was and how hard-nosed their lineup was and how they adjusted throughout that series, do you think the Rangers should have given a look to Zach Jones?
I think yes, but I don't think Fox nor Trouba should have been benched for him. I think Eric Gustafsson should have been. Gustafsson looked lost out there in that series. A lot of times, he was coughing up pucks. A lot of times, it looked like a deer in the headlights with Florida. I think it would have been to replace Gustafsson. Gustafsson was great in Adam Fox's absence earlier in the season, but had really slowed down ever since. But that was just one part of what went wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say the top players didn't show up, because the Rangers' top players in these playoffs, Trocheck, Zibanejad, Panarin, Lafreniere. Trocheck and Zibanejad, Trocheck was over a point per game for the playoffs. Zibanejad, at a point per game for the playoffs. Panarin just under, Lafreniere just under. Those guys showed up. But Kreider had 12 points too in 16 games. Once you got past that, it was Goodrow with 8 points, and the rest, the distribution wasn't the greatest. Whereas you look at Florida, okay, you only had Tkachuk, was over a point per game. You had Verhaeghe and Barkov just at a point per game. But then you got past them. You had guys at or near. You had Sam Reiner with 12 points, Lundell with 12 points, Forsling with 11 points, and Bennett with 10 points. But it goes even deeper than that. If you look at what Florida's third line did, and I know they were flip-flopping Bennett and Lundell, you had Luostarinen, Lundell, and Tarasenko as the third line, for argument's sake. Let's just say that, right? So you look at Luostarinen, 6 points in 17 games. Tarasenko, 6 points in 17 games. Okay. You had Lundell, 12 points in 17 games. And then if you're going to put Bennett there, 10 points in 12 games, which is at or near a point per game. Match set up against the Rangers' third line. Wenberg, Kakko, and Cooley in 15 to 16 playoff games, 2 points apiece. I said this series was going to be about depth. The Rangers' top line guys, people can cry about them not showing up. They did what they were supposed to do. Could they have been a little bit better? Hell yeah, they could have been. I'm sorry. The third line, Florida's third line, overmatched this Rangers' third line by a mile. Yeah. By a mile.
If I'm the Rangers at this point, I gotta think that you gotta it's do or die when it comes to Kaapo Kakko at this point. Like, I'm wondering if the change of scenery is like necessary at this point, because he is a player that I immediately think of not showing up. To kind of add on to your point, though, like the third line, I was fine with how Cooley did overall throughout the playoffs, especially for a younger kid coming into the playoffs, no playoff experience whatsoever. Thought he did relatively well. Alex Wenberg did a relatively decent job given his role. Where I really lose it a little bit, and I know that I'm essentially beating a dead horse with another dead horse, I'm lost on the utilization of the fourth line with Matt Rempe, because overall, I thought the Rangers played a lot better when Peter Laviolette was giving that fourth line more time on the ice and giving Matt Rempe more time to actually play crucial minutes. Putting trust in that line to do what they need to do. It was pivotal to the Rangers' success in that series. And you saw it in that overtime win in game 3 or game 4. And really well done. And Matt Rempe was playing overtime minutes and crucial overtime minutes at that. Now, I'm not saying that you can trust him throughout the entire playoffs with that, But we get to October this year, we got to figure out what's going on with him. We got to figure out if you can get him at least 9 to 10 minutes a night instead of like 2 minutes and 50 seconds. If you're only going to give him 5 minutes a game, you're better off putting Brodzinski in or anybody else in that role. It might not be the sexy pick, but at least putting the safe pick there so that way you can roll your fourth line and not gas guys over an extended period of time. That's honestly why Barclay Goodrow only had 8 points in this series. He didn't get the ice time towards the end.
And well aware on that too. Rempe, I mean, listen, it's a work in progress. You know he has the size. He actually had the speed. He was clocked as one of the fastest guys in one of the games. I don't remember which one. It's just teaching him the skill, the passing, the shooting, and maybe he can develop and maybe he can't. But another big thing with me, and Goodrow had a great series, not taking that away from him. No. If Wenberg never scored that goal in Game 3, I would be infuriated with him. And he was one of the deadline acquisitions, and that brings me to another deadline acquisition, and that's Jack Roslovic. Another big reason Florida won that series. Florida has a solid top 6. Let's not beat around the bush here with that top 6. Everybody in their top 6 has a set role. Now the Rangers, everybody in their top 6 has a set role except for one spot, and that one spot is that first line right wing spot. Now, at first, in the first 2 series, Roslovic was playing fairly well. A lot of us were thinking, here's another Vetrano. Here's another Frank Vetrano acquisition. You know, he'll be great for us. It didn't translate into the conference finals. He looked lost at times. He was on the third line at times, and the Roslovic acquisition just was terrible. And I wasn't thrilled with the acquisition to begin with. The guy I wanted was Riley Smith from Pittsburgh. Cap reasons, it didn't happen. I think if the Rangers would have picked up Riley Smith, maybe it's a different story right now. Riley Smith is built for the playoffs. Riley Smith has shown he can play in the playoffs. Riley Smith has shown you can plug him in. It worked in Vegas. It's kind of worked in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's looking to get rid of him now. Might be somebody to think about in the offseason. I don't really know. That was another big problem, for me at least. Roslovic was lost that entire series.
Yeah, a lot to dissect for the Rangers, and that's something we can certainly dissect a little bit more as we get into the offseason. But let's move on from this topic and talk a little bit about the Western Conference Final before digging into the Stanley Cup Final here in our predictions. Dallas versus Edmonton. Tom, I'll start with you on this one. I mean, I certainly have my thoughts on this one, but do you feel like this was more so a case that Dallas ran out of gas at the end of the line here, or they just had no answers for Edmonton's potent offense?
Well, you ever remember the beginning of the Third Mighty Ducks movie where the guy says they open their cabin door and let the Bears come walking right in? Mm-hmm. Kind of what Dallas did in Game 4. Dallas, a lot of people, I was listening to NHL Network Radio, guys like Steve Koulias, Mick Kern, Boomer and Hahn, all had Dallas in the finals after Game 3. And that looked like a pretty safe prediction after that first period. When Edmonton won Game 4, and in the style they won Game 4, where they just blew the doors off Dallas in those second and third periods, I said, we got a series here. And I had picked Edmonton to win in 6. When Edmonton won that game, I said, this might not be Dallas's year. And going into Game 5, especially, if that were a 3-2 nail-biter, you go into Game 5 thinking, as a Dallas fan, okay, you know, it was a close game, we got it. But with the momentum Edmonton had coming into Game 5, and the Game 5 that Ryan Nugent-Hopkins had for those Oilers, where it wasn't McDavid, it wasn't Draisaitl, it wasn't Bouchard, it was an old reliable like Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I think after Game 5, I said, oh, no, Edmonton, this is it for Dallas. Edmonton's got this. I think the other problem with Dallas is this. And it's a thing that's near and dear to me as a Ranger fan all those years. You had a guy there like Joe Pavelski who dazzled for many, many years. But it just so happens you get around 40 and your age catches up to you, injuries catches up to you. I saw what happened with the Rangers, running it with Brendan Shanahan late in his career and running it with Marty St. Louis late in his career. You know, the guys looked great and they got around 40 years old, and for whatever reason, injuries or age caught up to them and slowed them down. Not a knock on Joe Pavelski, and cheers to Joe Pavelski for a great career. He had just retired. But I think that Dallas was depending on Pavelski to do a little bit more this postseason, and it just didn't happen. The age bug caught up to him. It happened as a Ranger fan, maybe not with Shanahan back in 2008 because Yager was on fire and that team was not expected to really win a Stanley Cup, but it happened in 2015 in the loss to Tampa. Marty St. Louis' age just caught up to him, those playoffs. And he really was rendered rather ineffective. I will say that. I just want to pull the stats up for the Stars real fast if I can. Let me just do this real fast.
Yeah. While you pull up their stats, I mean, for me, Edmonton really blew the doors off of Dallas, like Tom had alluded to before. Their offense has been alive throughout the entire playoffs. Currently, you have 4 players in the top 5 in scoring for the entire playoffs. That's Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Zach Hyman, and Evan Bouchard. I didn't even need to pull up stats to know that one. I mean, all 4 guys have been like just absolutely delivering on all cylinders this entire playoffs. They have been as advertised since the regular season, and that's been made all the difference for Edmonton. Sometimes, you can make up a average defense, I'll call it, or like slightly above average defense, and average to below average goaltending, so long as the offense is there. And the offense has been there for Edmonton, and it's no knock on
the 2
Dallas.
best players in the world.
Yeah, and it's no knock on Dallas. I mean, I'm going to be curious to see if any kind of injuries do come out on the report for Dallas over the coming weeks of like things that they were dealing with. But this isn't going to be Dallas's last trip to like getting close to the Stanley Cup playoff or even possibly winning the Stanley Cup playoff. They're still going to be a favorite of mine. Spoiler alert for the Central Division next year. I think that they're going to come back with a vengeance next year. Sans Joe Pavelski, and congrats to him on an amazing career, probably a first ballot Hall of Famer in my mind. Tom, did you pull up those Dallas Star stats?
Yeah, and you listen, I know they depended a lot on Joe Pavelski. I do. I know that. Pavelski, 1 goal, 3 assists for 4 points as a top 6, top 9 guy.
Yeah.
It wasn't enough. And listen, I understand it caught up with him. And the Marty San Luis stat line back from 2015, I'm not going to pull it up, was pretty much the same. San Luis didn't score a goal until the conference finals against Tampa after basically running with it the year before with the Rangers, getting them to the finals against the Kings. I don't think Dallas is going anywhere. I don't. I think they're only going to get better. They even inserted Maverick Borkin for the last game against Edmonton. Don't think they're going anywhere. But I mean, even the stat lines too, where you say the depth was spread out, which I understand it was.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, man, you had McDavid at 31 points and Draisaitl with 28 points for these playoffs. Well, while Dallas's top scorers, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong tab. Dallas' top scorers had 16 points, and 16 points was Johnson and Heiskanen. And you go down. You had Nugent Hopkins with 20 points, Zach Hyman with 18 points. I mean, and then you had Evan Bouchard, a defenseman, with 27 points. You can talk about the depth all you want, but man, when it's just a glaring difference with your top guys, where this is unlike the Rangers-Panthers series, where the glaring difference was the third line. The glaring difference in this one was the top 2 lines, and it helps again when you have the 2 best players in the world. Like I said, don't think Dallas is going anywhere, and I'll allude back to the Rangers series. I don't think the Rangers are going anywhere either.
No, I think there's a lot to be excited for both teams that reach the Western and Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think this is their last rodeo. I don't think this is going to be the last time we see them as a highly competitive team in both respective markets. For Dallas's side, there's a lot to be excited for on the young superstars side of things and the younger players that are going to be impact players over the next few years. Miro Heiskanen, Jason Robertson, Logan Stankoven, and Wyatt Johnston, Maverick Bork, who's now entered the chat. There's a lot, and can't forget about Jake Ottinger at all. Probably one of the best young goaltenders under the age of 25 in the league at the moment. Yeah, there's a lot to be excited for Dallas. There's a lot to be excited for New York. There's definitely going to be some question marks for both teams in the offseason. I'll be intrigued and following what they're going to do to improve their lineups ever so slightly as we go into the regular season this upcoming year. But that's discussion for another time. It's time to move on to the real topic. Edmonton Oilers versus Florida Panthers Stanley Cup Final 2024. Here we are. It's been a long road, and we're going to see a firecracker of a Stanley Cup final. Just some things that I'm excited to see in this matchup. You're going to see Matt Tkachuk probably at the forefront of this entire series because of his connection from the Calgary Flames and the Battle of Alberta. And I think you're going to see some old wounds opened here. I think Matt Tkachuk is going to play with a lot of passion, a lot of fire in his eyes as well. For Edmonton, This is their first time going to the Stanley Cup Finals since 05-06, where they lost to the Carolina Hurricanes. First time in almost 2 decades going back. And for Edmonton, even more important for the nation of Canada, to potentially be the first Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup since the 1993 Montreal Canadiens. Nothing to sniff at there. You're going to have a lot of people rooting for Edmonton in this series. It's Connor McDavid's first Stanley Cup final, and it would be amazing for hockey if Connor McDavid could hoist the Stanley Cup for his first go around. I think that'd be great on all sides. For Florida, it would be great to see a Florida team with passionate players hoist the Stanley Cup too. We've seen a lot of really good hockey being played over the last 2 years down in Florida. Some tales of the tape real quick, just kind of comparing and contrasting a little bit of the differences in this series. We're going to see the farthest distance traveled between games, which is why you're going to see after game 2, once it moves from one arena to the next, you've got 2 days of layover because
Can
you
I
have
just say something? They actually have been doing that the last couple of years. They've been adding the travel day in. This is nothing new. It's something that's been done. The only reason it wasn't done 2 years ago was because of all the COVID stuff that messed with the season. So they wanted to kind of, just get it done a little bit quicker.
And that's true too. And good amendment on that one. But it's well over 2,500 miles that I think is being traveled between Edmonton to Florida, I believe. Or at least
something along those lines.
Something along those lines. It's something crazy. I'll have to actually check on that one. I'm actually not sure if it's that far of a distance, actually. I'll check on that in a little bit. Tails of the tape in terms of points scored over the playoffs as well here. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the playoff stats. There we go. So for the Florida Panthers, your leading scorers over the past number of rounds. This is in 17 games played for most players. Leading scorers, Matt Tkachuk, as I mentioned before, 19 points in 17 games, 14 assists to boot for him. Carter Verhaeghe, 17 points in 17 games as well. And Alexander Barkov, 17 points in 17 games. The next top point getters tied for 4th and 5th, respectively, is Sam Reinhart and Anton Lundell. 12 points each for them. And then after that, Gustav Forsling with 11 points. And then another X Factor player that I'm going to bring up here, Sam Bennett, which, if you're following at home, this is also going to be the first, and this is probably the weirdest stat of any, well, not the weirdest. I'll bring up the weirdest one coming up. This is definitely one of the weirder stats. This is the first Stanley Cup final that we're seeing a number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 overall pick from the same draft in a Stanley Cup final. That would be Aaron Ekblad, Sam Reinhart, Leon Draisaitl, and Sam Bennett, all playing in this respective series. They were the top picks from the 2011 draft, I want to say.
I think it was 2014, if I'm not mistaken.
I went back too far. Yeah, 2014 sounds more correct.
Yeah, 2011
might have been Steven Stamkos.
No, Stamkos was 08. Stamkos was 08. I'm not going to go back and look at the 2011 draft, but I'm pretty sure it was 2014, and it is 2014.
You are correct. As per usual, you are correct on that one. No, the weirdest stat that could possibly go here is this is going to be the first time in Stanley Cup etching history that the name Evan is going on the Stanley Cup, because either Evan Rodriguez or Evan Bouchard are going on the Stanley Cup, and no first name of Evan has ever gone on the Stanley Cup, which is the weirdest stat that I could possibly come up with. Anyway, Tom, I'm going to let you continue previewing here. Edmonton, you had their stats pulled up before. Give us some tales of the tape there. Who are our top point getters for Edmonton currently?
Well, surprise, surprise. You'll never guess who they are. It's Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Connor McDavid with a whopping 31 points in 18 games. Reminds me of this guy named Wayne who wore 2 numbers up from him back in the 80s. followed by Leon Draisaitl with 28 points in 18 games, 10 goals, 18 assists. Followed by on D, Evan Bouchard, 6 goals, 21 assists, 27 points. Followed by Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, 6 goals, 14 assists, 20 points. And Zach Hyman with 14 goals, 4 assists, and 18 points. After that, there's a steep drop-off.
Yeah. Which has always been the plight of Edmonton Oilers teams over the last few years. But I feel like this year's a little bit different for Edmonton just because I feel like there's a little bit more balance than there's been in previous years. Looking at daily face-off for the line combos and what we could see tomorrow night. Not tomorrow night. Well, tomorrow
Saturday
night. Once, well, yeah, I'm saying tomorrow night realistically once this video goes up.
That's true too. That's true too.
Line one for Edmonton is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Connor McDavid, and Zach Hyman going from left wing to center to right wing. Second line is Dylan Holloway, Leon Draisaitl, and Evander Kane. Third line is Matthias Janmark, Adam Henrique, and Connor Brown. And fourth line consisting of Ryan McLeod, Derek Ryan, and you guessed it, Corey Perry, who's making his fifth appearance with a fifth team in the Stanley Cup final. No player has ever played for 5 different teams and made the Stanley Cup. So this is going to be history for Corey Perry as well. On defense, we've got Matthias Ekholm with Evan Bouchard, Darnell Nurse with Brett Kulick, and Philip Broberg with Cody Ceci. And between the pipes tentatively right now is going to be Stuart Skinner with Calvin Pickard backing up. This is a pretty well-balanced Edmonton Oilers team overall. We've seen in the past, the top 2 lines being absolutely stacked, especially, stacking Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid together to open a game, which we have seen a little bit of mixing from Chris Knobloch, mixing up the lines mid-game and putting Leon Draisaitl with Connor McDavid 5-on-5. But I like the balance here overall. I like that third line for Edmonton specifically, just because they're just a wear you down kind of third line overall. And then you just have a very pesky kind of line in that fourth line with Corey Perry playing down on the fourth line right now. What do you think of Edmonton's lineup overall? Do you feel like there are any kind of glaring marks that Florida could expose?
I'm going to say it's that third line. Florida's third line might be better than that third line. That Janmark, Henrique, and Brown, the Rangers had the same problem with them with their third line. If that third line gets outscored by Florida's third line, I feel like it's going to be a problem. I like the top 2 lines. I don't see any holes. Dylan Holloway might be a question mark on that left side on the second line. I'm not going to lie. But the first line, your first line is set, and your second line with Draisaitl and Kane is also set. So I like the first 2 lines, and I even like the fourth line there with Corey Perry and Derek Ryan and Ryan McLeod. So I think the lines are good. It's just a matter of the matchups, too. And at home, they're going to try to keep McDavid away from Barkov, whereas on the road, Barkov's going to follow McDavid around. In Florida, Barkov's going to follow McDavid all over the ice.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a for sure thing to monitor in general. And just to see the amount of pests on either side that could be ruffling some feathers throughout. Figure Makachuk and Sam Bennett are certainly going to ruffle some feathers in this series. If we see Nick Cousins in the series for Florida, maybe if Florida goes down a game or 2, maybe we could see him inserted for Ryan Lomberg or Kevin Stenlund on the fourth line. And that could be something that we could possibly see just to add a little bit of added, sandpaper, if you will. But on Edmonton's side, there's no real shortage of sandpaper on their side because Evander Kane is a pest in his own right, for sure. He's not afraid to mix it up with certain players. Derek Ryan is also another person I think of as somebody that can step up to the plate when need be. And on defense, looking at guys like Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci, who tend to ruffle some feathers with the way that they play, and especially with how frustrating Cody Ceci can be defensively on his side of the ice. Looking at Florida's offense right now, and just lineup in general, because we looked at Edmonton's lineup. Let's look at Florida's lineup. On the first line, like I said, going from left wing center to right wing, Carter Verhaeghe with Alexander Barkov and Sam Bennett. or Sam Reinhart rather. On the second line, Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, and Evan Rodriguez. That third line, as we've been talking about quite a bit, Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, and Vladimir Tarasenko. And on the fourth line, Ryan Lomberg with Kevin Stenlund and Kyle Okposo. The defensive pairings, Gustav Forsling with Aaron Ekblad, Nico Mikkola with Brandon Montour, and Oliver Ekman-Larsson with Dmitry Kulikov. Goaltending, starting between the pipes, predominantly is going to be Sergei Bobrovsky, barring any kind of emergency. And backing him up is going to be Anthony Stolarz. Looking at Florida's lineup, do you feel like there's any places that Edmonton can expose offensively?
It's the first two lines. That's what it's going to come down to. I like Florida's third line a lot better. The fourth lines, I think, are fairly even. You go on D. Now, I look on D. Now, obviously, you have Evan Bouchard having the playoffs of his life right now. So the first pair, yeah, but then you get into the second and third pairs, and I got to give my nod to Florida. And in net, I got to give my nod to Florida as well. What may give Florida a slight advantage this series is you're not looking at Igor Shesterkin down on another net. You're looking at Stuart Skinner. But here's the other problem. Right now, I look at these top two lines. You look at Florida's first line. Florida's first line is Verhaeghe, Barkov, and Reinhart versus Nugent-Hopkins, McDavid, and Hyman. McDavid, I take over Barkov any day of the week. Hyman and Reinhart probably cancel each other out. Nugent-Hopkins and Verhaeghe probably cancel each other out as well. But then you're basically saying you have the Selke winner, which, don't get me wrong, winning the Selke trophy is a hell of an honor, being the best defensive forward in the league, against the best player in the world, against maybe the best player to play this game since Wayne Gretzky played. You're looking at that. Now you go to line two. Holloway, Draisaitl, and Kane versus Tkachuk, Bennett, and Rodriguez. If Kane is healthy, in terms of the pest factor, Kane and Tkachuk are going to cancel each other out. Then you have Dylan Holloway and Evan Rodriguez. Maybe a slight nod to Rodriguez, but not by a lot.
So then I was even going to say that. I think Rodriguez doesn't get enough credit for how he plays. I mean, he's kind of an offensive chameleon in a lot of ways, where he can play up to a second line or he can play down to a fourth line and understand his role so well in either capacity. And he's done really, really nicely fitting in with that second line for Florida. Continue on, Tom.
But then at the center ice position is where you have your biggest area of separation right now. Now, I know Paul Maurice liked to flip-flop Sam Bennett and Anton Lundell, and by all means, that's a great thing to do. It's good to be able to adjust. All coaches have to adjust in the playoffs, unless you're Gerard Gallant, who just stands there and watches things. That's the story for another day. That's a story for another day. So, okay, you want to flip-flop Sam Bennett and Anton Lundell. Bennett, 10 points in 12 games. Lundell, 12 points in 17 games. Honorable. Except for one thing. You're looking at Leon Draisaitl right now, 28 points in 18 games. And you know, you could debate who the second best player in the world was for the last few years. Whether it have been McKinnon, whether it have been Matthews, whether it have been Panarin. Right now, I don't think that you can debate that nobody, with the exception of Connor McDavid, is better than Leon Draisaitl at this sport right now. And that second line center ice position is the biggest area of separation. No disrespect to Sam Bennett. No disrespect to Anton Lundell. I wanted the Rangers to get Anton Lundell in the draft back in 20 until a golf ball went their way and a ping pong ball went their way, and they got Alexei Lafreniere, who's turned out to be very good. We can talk about him a different day.
Yeah.
But the separation between those two and Leon Draisaitl is paramount right now. That advantage is huge on the second line. Now, while I give the first line to Edmonton the nod, this is a huge nod for the second line. This is a huge nod. This is where far and away the second Leon Draisaitl is better than anybody they're going to put in there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if, honestly, with the second line for Edmonton, if Paul Maurice coaching Florida right now, if he combats that maybe with putting out the third line up against that second line just to frustrate them a little bit and try to match a little bit of that speed with Vladimir Tarasenko and Eetu Luostarinen. That's going to be something that I'm going to be curious to see how Paul Maurice kind of mixes and matches these lines to try to match certain lines up against each other. And that's going to be something that is worth monitoring throughout the playoffs and seeing who's on the ice at given times, especially in game one, especially in game two, how both coaches adjust throughout. But we've talked quite a bit about this. It's time to put in our predictions. It's time to lock them in. Tom, I'm hitting you with this. It's our question of the day. Who wins the Stanley Cup? How many games?
Well, I hate to say this, and I hate to use some comparisons here, but this Florida team is similar in a way to the 94 Rangers and the 99 Dallas Stars in terms of where they're going. They are do or die. They are win now. People can say how great the Panthers are going to be for the next few years. Right now, the Panthers' cap space is $19 million, and after this is over, win, lose, or draw, well, you can't draw, obviously, but you understand where I'm getting at. You have to pay Brandon Montour, Anton Lundell, and Sam Reinhart after this season with $19 million left in cap space, whether you win the Cup or whether you don't. Florida needs to win the Cup now. Not next year, not the year after. They're going to be in trouble the next few years after this with the cap issues and with the draft space and with virtually no prospects in the system. Yeah. They are going to have some trouble. And it's similar, and they're similar in the way they played the game to the 07 Anaheim Ducks as well. And another team that ran into problems after they won the Cup. So you look at it, it's a do or die thing. I think Edmonton will be back again at some point. Maybe not next year, but they will be back. McDavid and Draisaitl, still fairly young. They'll still have their chance to win. So I'm going to painfully go with Florida in 6. I hate to say it, but with a caveat here. You go into Edmonton, and if Florida has a 3-2 lead and they don't win that 6th game and they have to go back for 7, that's when I think we may see Connor McDavid wake up and have one of the greatest performances of all time if it goes 7 and Edmonton wins it. But if it goes 6, the Cup belongs to Florida. They win it. They have, I guess, a parade in Miami or wherever. They come back next year. The team looks drastically different, and nobody shows up and cares anymore. And it'll be just like the Anaheim Ducks in 07, who walked by the Detroit Red Wings in the Western Conference Final like they walked by my Rangers this year. And what did the Red Wings do in 08? Walk to the Cup. That's what I hope the Rangers do next year, but that's besides the point.
Oh, man. I think either way, we're getting a very good Stanley Cup matchup, and I think this is going to be a really exciting series. I think this is probably one of the more intriguing series of the last few years since the COVID era, honestly. There's a lot of ways that this series could go. I could see a scenario where Florida wins in 6, like Tom was mentioning. I could see a scenario where Edmonton wins in 6. No matter what, I think this game is going at least 6 games. I think they're going to match tit for tat. And no matter what, I think a lot of us hockey fans are going to be happy no matter what. There is a reason why I'm wearing this jersey tonight, though. So let's address that. I think that this is finally the time after 3 decades at this point, more than 3 decades. I think it's finally time to bring the Stanley Cup back to Canada. And I think it's going to happen. Florida, they're in win now mode, and there's going to be a lot of problems next year if they don't win the Stanley Cup with how much the Eastern Conference is growing all around. There's going to be
a lot of problems if they do win the Stanley Cup because they're not going to be able to. I don't mean to go off topic here. I meant to say before. That's what kind of makes me positive as a Ranger fan, knowing them and Carolina are going to be much weaker next year. But yeah, that's besides the point. Win or lose, the Panthers are going to be in trouble next year.
Yeah, I think no matter what, I think there's going to be a lot of question marks for Florida coming out of this offseason. But for Edmonton, maybe not so much. And it would be far less question marks if they hoist the Stanley Cup, like I predict that they are going to do in 6 games. I'm going to lock this in. I'm going to say Edmonton wins in 6 games. So we've got differing opinions here. We'll check back with you guys once the Stanley Cup is wrapped up, and we'll see who's the winner and who's the loser on this one. Is Tom's prediction going to come true?
I hope not.
Likely. Is my prediction going to come true?
I hope so.
Really unlikely. I hope so too. But based on my track record, I picked the wrong teams last round, so we'll see what happens here. But hey, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? Let us know down below. Join the conversation. Comment. Let us know what you guys think of this upcoming Stanley Cup. And if this is your first time watching our content, thank you guys so much for watching our content. But we would really appreciate you guys if you subscribe down below. YouTube.com/NHL on I-80 Sports. It would really help us out quite a bit if you like our content. And we've got more content to come in the offseason. So we're looking forward to that. So you don't want to go anywhere. Hit the bell notifications so that way you guys know when our content goes up. And if you're still on Twitter, make sure you follow us down below at I-80_Sports NHL. And if you follow us already there or you're subscribed to us already there, thank you guys so much because we greatly value all of your support. Can't do this without you guys. But lo and behold, it's time to watch the Stanley Cup. So these have been our predictions. These have been our thoughts. Let's watch together. Let's see what happens in the Stanley Cup. Edmonton Oilers versus Florida Panthers. It's going to be a fun one. Strap in, ditch the socks, grab your Crocs. It's going to be a wet one, but we'll be watching with you guys. And I'm Brian. He's been Tom. This has been our Stanley Cup predictions here on I-80 Sports.